big show coming up, and there's just 19 days until the government's first budget. Britain holds its breath as to who and what will be taxed higher. And reading the papers this morning, Nana, it seems like capital gains tax is in the Chancellor's sights.
Well, do you know what? Because they said they're not going to tax working people, now they're struggling to find people who don't work or don't fit the definition. That very loose definition that Sir Keir Starmer used, which means that, well, we're going to have to tax assets because we said we won't tax people. Well, of course, capital gains, it's the wealth tax paid by about 350,000 people. I think that means on the profits from the sale of a property or shares or investments. So tax on an asset, profits on assets.
Yeah, I like how Labour try and suggest those people who have assets aren't working people. They've worked to build the money to invest in those assets. But anyway, it comes as Chancellor Rachel Reeves denies plans to increase capital gains to 39%, a whopping figure and far exceeding anything in Europe. But is there no smoke without fire? We're joined now by the former Labour MP and Minister for Europe, Denis McShane. Good morning, Denis. This seems a bit of an own goal, doesn't it? I know the Treasury have denied the 39%, but who's to say they won't just do 38.9% and say, see, we were telling the truth?
Well, who's to say they won't do 60 or 70 or 80%? Because it's a newspaper headline. It happens before every budget. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't manipulated by Treasury spinners so that when the budget is announced and it's not so dramatic, people say, woof, Rachel saved us X, Y and Z. Now, it is very serious because they are the super rich people, of course. But there are an awful lot of people whose main asset on which a capital gain tax could be charged is their home, in the sense that it was a home they owned, but they've downsized or they've moved and given money to their children, but they've kept a second home which they rent out, which actually provides a home for a family or an individual. Amongst those, 2 million people who bought their council flats, who are not rich, who are not wealthy. And I think if they are faced with a 39% tax increase because they decide they have to sell, they're not well, they need the money, they want to help their kids, then I don't think the Labour government's going to store of popularity is going to go up. There's a better alternative. I hate to say this, but France faces exactly the same problem. President Macron, like our Brexit prime ministers, was a disaster in managing the nation's finances. France has the same kind of deficit as we've got. So Michel Barnier, you remember him from Brexit, the new prime minister of France, he is saying, let us put a bit more money on the very, very rich who can afford, who can pay it, let's be quite clear, and also a little bit of more money on the very wealthiest of firms, but to protect Monsieur et Madame ordinary French person who might, they rent out. A lot of people in Europe buy a home, a flat, as a kind of pension, as I think more people do in this country. And frankly, taxing pensioners, again, is not something I think that is going to win the Labour Party a lot of support in the nation.
Because that's what it really boils down to, doesn't it? Mostly the people who, the mass majority of people who will sort of accrue capital gains tax will be the older generation because they're sat on the properties. Most of it comes from property. So once again, it's an attack on pensioners, really, and anyone who's been prudent in their life to invest. Why would anybody who has any money want to keep it in this country?
Well, because frankly, our tax base is much lower than most other countries. I mean, you go to America, I talk to friends who've got green cards and come back, and the tax Americans have to pay is quite extraordinary. Now, I lived in Switzerland, worked in Switzerland for 15 years. My income tax was very low, but I had to pay a federal tax, a cantonal tax, a municipal tax, a housing tax, a dental tax, a medical tax. So actually, I thought I was really rich when I put my Swiss francs into English pounds. This was some time ago, but actually I was paying so many different obligatory charges. My income wasn't much better in terms of purchasing power than it had been in the UK. So, but it's a tricky problem. Look, this is what we inherited from those wonderful Brexit era prime ministers. Boris Johnson. Liz Truss,
this is not true. You can't. You're now blaming Brexit. You can't blame Brexit for anything.
Please don't interrupt. I'm blaming the three.
I will if I want to, Denis.
Of course you can. I mean, I love you interrupting me. I'm blaming the three last prime ministers: Johnson, Truss, And Sunak perhaps had the intelligence to start correcting, but between Luss and Johnson and Truss, they broke the bank, they bust the bank, and they plunged the nation into such enormous deficit. So what do we do? Which schools do we close down? Which hospitals do we close down? Which dental
Dennis, I'll tell you what they could do. Instead of plundering ambitious people who have risked their money on investments, and by the way, your claim that it's would be the most attractive tax environment in Europe is completely untrue. I mean, you go to Portugal where you only pay 28% on half of your gains. But anyway, they could start with the £11 billion they're paying in climate aid, the £14 billion they're giving to train drivers and public sector workers who are already quite handsomely paid. It goes on and on. There was the £22 billion carbon capture, which has been widely slammed by eco-zealots and sceptics alike. I mean, there's about £40 billion for starters. Why are you going after people who are ambitious and trying to better themselves and their families and their kids by investing in
things? They could also go for the civil service as well.
I'm no problems with controlling and slimming down the civil servants one little bit. But Ben, I think you said that you came in from Sussex. I don't know if you commute on a train or drive.
Yes.
Okay, on train. Well, you'll remember those endless train strikes that disrupted the economy, disrupted travel, because the government wouldn't negotiate. Yes, I agree. Labour has settled it, I hope, for a good few years. Price worth paying if we can get our rail network back working again. But all of that said, I'm a firm believer that the state is too big. I think that Rachel Reeves is too. I think certainly under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, we also had a prudent budget, but we managed the economy well. But we did pay more taxes. I mean, I paid a bit more tax under Labour, and as a result, we had 20,000 more cops on the streets. People liked that. We had Sure Start breakfast clubs for every poor child. That was good for Britain, and we had economic growth in those years twice as high as we've had since 2010. So I don't know how you get the balance right. Poor Rachel. I mean,
Rachel is not poor. Rachel has a very good salary, and I'm pretty sure she got. Did she get Taylor Swift tickets as well? I mean, a lot of them.
I'm using, like I say, poor Nana, she always has to go to bed early. I don't mean in money terms.
Well, I'm just making sure. Look, this is the thing that people are struggling with. It's all very well saying that you paid more tax at another time and this, that and the other, but it is the ricochet of these things that they're doing that have a serious impact on the confidence of people wanting to invest money in this country. I mean, I even heard that they were considering some sort of tax if people try and move their assets out of this country to keep them. It's this sort of narrative that makes this country uninvestable. How are Labour going to change that perception? Because the perception is that Labour can constantly spend, well, they keep spending everybody's money until they run out, which was what Mrs Thatcher said.
Well, I don't think that's right. Labour is, I think, doing a lot of good things on energy, moving to a much more electricity-based energy.
But that's
system.
not good.
What?
How can that be good? You're getting the electricity. Currently, a lot of that electricity is coming via fossil fuels, and you're getting rid of your own steel manufacturing base for virgin steel. So everything you're going to be buying will be from China or somewhere else. So you're beholding now to somebody else for something else rather than gas. It's now steel.
Forgive me. I've worked in the steel industry for a long time. But we are now moving to electric arc furnace steel production, which is CO2 neutral. Now, you look at what happened in Florida in the last couple of days. Everybody there agrees those sea surges are a result, in part, not total blaming it, in part of the rise in temperatures in the atmosphere, which if we don't control, we're going to see more and more of that.
Oh, come on,
we're not about Florida, but the whole East Europe, Southeast Europe, 30 deaths, not much reported, just a little news item, I think, looking at GB News, but no big discussion. We go bonkers on what happened in Florida because we like America, but people are dying now and industries are being seriously damaged because we're
Dennis, thank you very much. We're running out of time. Seriously, I could talk to you about that for ages, but I feel that you're going on to a subject that you have no idea. You don't know what you're talking about when it comes to climate change. And, you know, and in fact, most of the scientists who are saying 99% of us think this are funded often by the government who want a certain narrative. Dennis McShane, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dennis. OK, up next, what on earth, Nana, happened to England in their match with Greece last night? Did you see it at home? Do we need to bring back, dare I say it, Gareth Southgate?